All right, it's 9:21. The goal will be done by no later than 10:30 and hopefully 10:15, 10 to 10:15. So chapter 10, as you can see, more skills for working with Windows forms and controls. So they will talk about some controls we have not talked about yet, such as combo boxes. You saw list boxes. We did use those in one of those the array GUI one that we did. Check boxes, radio buttons, group boxes we've looked at. Not going to go over setting the tab order because we've done that. How to get information you need for a control. I can't show you that, but again, remember, you put your mouse on the control, you hit F1. All right. Working with multi-form projects, that's why I gave you the handout or the app that I gave you. So we'll go over that. The message box class, we're not going to spend much time on that because I gave you all the code for doing the message box a lot earlier in the semester. And then they have a payment application that they've done. So I'll tell you what, let's do this a little bit differently. And what I mean is, I'm going to go over the programs first. So if you have those with you, fine, just unzip them and bring them up. There are two applications in here. If you look at the actual thing, when I notice this one's called multiple form and one form, I had one called multiple forms with an S on it, but I screwed it up. And when I tried to remove it, it gave me all sorts of errors, so I brought it back, even though there's nothing in it of any value. All right. First, let's look at this one form. Now, if I asked you to do this, if I said, I'm giving you 5 minutes, whoops, the wrong one, sorry, let me rerun that, reset this, so that's our startup project. Okay, so if I said, I want you to build a form, and I want you to put 4 buttons on it, and those 4 buttons would be called red, white, blue, and exit. When you click the red button, I want the background color for the form to be red. When you click the white button, I want the background color for the form to be white. When you click the blue button, I want the background color for the form to be blue. And when you click the exit, you give the user the chance to exit. And I want you to also set the original color for the form when you run it to yellow. If I said, how many of you think you could do that in 5 or 10 minutes, you'd probably all raise your hand. All right, but when you actually went to change the color, it'd be a little harder than you think it would. And that's what we're going to look at first. So when you look at this, red, white, blue, white, red, exit. And I can say no and stay there. I can say exit and change. Hopefully that's pretty obvious as far as what's going on. But what may or may not be obvious is this. No pun intended. You can't put down the name of the form dot back color. It doesn't understand that. So the name of this form right here is form 1. All right, so I can't come in here and say form, what is it? Form 1 dot back color. All right, and even if I go in here and I change the name of the form, all right, so if I do come in and actually change the name of the form itself, I still can't go in and say form 1 dot or whatever it is dot. And it's a contextual thing. It needs to know what you're talking about. So the current thing that you're working on is referred to in this language as this. It's also referred to as this in JavaScript. It's also referred to as this in Java. The only thing that's different is sometimes in here when you are referring to it, you don't say this, you might say me in this language. But as soon as I put in this, one of the things that comes up then, this dot, and notice when I go into the B's, back color. All right? So when I say this dot back color, then I can just tell it what color I want it to be. And it's color dot. It's not just red. It needs to know color dot. So in other words, in all of these, notice I'm doing the same thing, but when the red one, I'm saying color red, the white one, color white, the blue one, color blue. And hopefully that makes sense to all of you. All right, but that was just to introduce the idea of using the word this. And then our exit button hasn't changed at all. Okay, so let me bring up the other one. And let me reset the start project. And let me close all of this stuff that I've got open. I'm going to close everything that's open right now. Oh, okay, fine. All right, so everything's closed. And now I'm going to run this. It's the same kind of thing. But what I want to have happen now is when I click red, I want it to go to a different form that's red in the background. When I go to click white, I want it to go to a form that's white with a background. When I go to blue, I want it to go to a different form. And then I've got my exit button. So notice red. See up here it says form main. Can you see this? Right there. When I click red, it's now at form red. It's now at form blue. It's now at form white. And when I go to any of those forms, for instance, when I go to red, there's no red button anymore. There's a white button, there's a blue button, an exit button, and a home button to get me back to the home page. And boom, there I am. White, there's a red and a blue, but no white button, but a home button and an exit. And finally, blue, where there's a red button and a white button, but no blue button. Does all that make sense to you? All right. And I just did this because it's something people can identify with. You know, it's fairly simple to figure out and see what's happening there. So how did we do all this? Well, when we started, we had just our main form, which is by default is called form 1. All right. Now, when you do this, what I thought I'd be able to do, please look up on the screen here because it didn't work. I created this first one, form main. Looks like this. Just made the background purple. You know, I could have made it anything. I didn't want to make it white because we have got one that goes to white. So I made it purple. So that's all fine and dandy. Then I came up here and literally changed the name. So I right mouse clicked on here and changed the name by using rename. So instead of form 1, I wanted it to be called form main. And it was changed. That's all fine and dandy. But then I thought what I could do would just be to go and take form main, right mouse click on it, choose copy, then go back up to here and choose paste. And guess what? It works. And then I made all those changes. So now I had my main form and I did my red one. And I thought, well, this is good. I'm going to do it again. Then it don't work. And it has to do with a bunch of the system files that you're trying to overwrite with the same name and it's confused. So for adding a new form, the best way to do that, so let's say I wanted to add a new form in here, then call it green. I'm going to add it and get rid of it right away. Okay? So you come up to your project name right here where you right mouse click on it, you choose add, and then you choose new item right here. And one of the items that's going to be in there is form. So if I wanted to make a green form, I can literally go all over the whole thing and just type in here right now, form green. Hit enter, and it created it. And if you look here, there's form green. That's how you should always create a new form. I don't want it anymore, so I'm just going to right mouse click on it, choose delete. It will warn me and say, hey, it's deleted permanently. Yeah, it's gone now. But that's how you create a new form. All right, just so you're aware of that. So let's look at the code to go from one form to another form. So the first thing I did was I literally wrote down the sizes because I wanted this to look the same, very symmetrical as you went from form to form. So I made this one, copy down the size of the form right here, this being 1102 by 825, and I wanted to make sure all the other forms were 1102 by 825. Then I saw where my buttons placed. So this one was at location 65, 658. So 65 pixels over, 658 pixels down. And then I looked at the next one, and that was at 344, 658. Then the next one, that was at 611, 658. And the last one, which was at 850, 658. Does that make sense to everyone? Then I said, well, I might as well put the same kind of thing on each one of these. They'll all be a little bit different, but I wanted the word red, or the word white, or the word blue, or the word home, or the word exit. All right? And how do I do that? Well, take a look on the screen here. This is the code for virtually all of these. I'm not saying this is the only way of doing what I'm doing, but it's the way that I used. So when you click the red button to say this.hide hides the current form. That's that purple one. So it now is about to become invisible. You use the hide method. Then you have to create or instantiate a new form. That is object-oriented programming right there in a nutshell. I'm saying I've got a class named form. I want to make a new form object. I want that to be called form red. And I want to do that by creating a new form red object. You don't always do it just like this, but that's how you do it here. And then I want it to show. So you use show dialog. So why am I even telling you this? Because when we start on this project that we're doing as a class next week, I'm not going to be far ahead of you. I'm just telling you right now. All right? Why? Because my wife told me I'm going furniture shopping this weekend. So I'm probably not going to have as much time to work on this as I'd like to. But the point is this. What we'll want to have happen is, how many people here, I'm asking a question, how many people here, raise your hand, you can lie if you want, I guess, know what a splash screen is? All right, at least one. Have you ever if you're a gamer or anything, started up a new game and you get a screen that comes up at the beginning with the name of the game and maybe the logo for it and whatever, and then it goes to another screen? That's a splash screen. When we create our employee database or our employee project, we're going to have a splash screen. We're going to have it start with a splash screen. Now, I'm going to make one, but I don't want you to use mine. You can use mine as we're doing this, but eventually you're going to turn this project in. I want you to put in your own splash screen. I don't want you to use my colors. I want you to use your colors. I don't want you to use my logo if I make a logo. I want you to use your logo. Does all that make sense? And why would I even be doing that? Well, let's assume that it is May a year from now. So May of 2022. And these four have just graduated. Granted, you three have another class to take, but you get what I'm saying. Now, Gabriel B. and Christopher G. have applied for the same job. And they both have that particular thing on their portfolio. I don't want them to look identical so that if a prospective employer looks at it, they say, wow, these two things are exactly identical to one another. No, I want them to look personalized. Does that make sense? All right, and that's the reason for it. So I will create a splash screen with you next week, but I'm going to say that I don't want you to use that one. I want you to eventually create your own. All right? And when we do that, we're going to put all sorts of stuff on it. So we'll, the name, you can, if you want to have a mythical name for your company, I don't care. Anything you want. And then we'll have an opening screen. That opening screen will have some kind of a text area in it that will explain what the program's about. And then it'll have 4 different radio buttons in it, all right, that will allow you to enter or look at information for 4 different kinds of employees. So you'll click the button for the employee you want, and you'll click like go to employee or whatever, and you'll go to that type of employee. Does that make sense? So we'll have one form that we'll be able to use for our hourly employees, one form that we'll be able to use for example, for, I don't know, salaried employees, one form for piece worker employees, and one form for commission worker employees. So we'll do that, and like I said, then we'll take all that information that we create, we'll attempt to save it to 4 different files. And then when we bring up that information, we'll be able to iterate our way through it by iterating through the file. Does that make sense? Then we will come in and add an employee class, and then we will make subclasses. So we'll say we will make an hourly employee class, which will be a subclass of employee. We'll make a piece worker employee class, which will be a subclass of employee, etc. All right, that'll get us to the break. Then after the break, we're going to look at databases. We're going to first look at databases, not worry at all about this project. Just get you on board with databases. Then we're going to attempt to take this information that we have in files and put it into a database. That's what we're going to be doing for the majority of the rest of the semester. All right? Okay, so I've got all this. The only thing that's kind of bad about this, if you look up on the screen, please, here, is notice, wow, what did I do here? I've commented out my exit routine. Why would I do that? Because I'm now writing it 5 times. Once for my main screen, once for the red form, once for the blue form, once for the white form, etc. I go 4 times, but you get the idea. And it's the same exact code every time. It works, but that's code bloat. That's writing code when you don't need to. So, what did I do? Again, if hopefully you can see this well enough, especially Christopher, you and Adam, you from the back. I went over here and I right mouse clicked on the name of my project. I chose add again, but this time I went to new item and I went down and I chose code file right there, just code file. And that makes a brand new file. This file that you create, it's called a code file because it shouldn't have anything in it but code. Does that make sense? All right. And you can make it, call it whatever you want and do whatever you want with it. I called mine, I literally stole it from online. All right. So I called it globalmethods.cs. And I give attribution when I rip something off. So that's where I took it from. So I created it and I called it global. All right. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. I called it globals. Okay. And it put it into a namespace called globals. What does that mean? Who cares? Well, look, do you notice if I go to my main form and I go to the top of the form and I go to the code here, do you notice how it says multiple form? You see that? That's this, right? Multiple form. So that's multiple form. The red one is multiple form. The white one is multiple form. And the blue one is multiple form. All right? But I didn't want those to be part of that namespace. I wanted to make my own. So when I got this new file, literally when I created this, guess what was in it? The answer would be absolutely nothing. It's a totally 100% empty file. There is nothing in it. No using, no nothing. So I took this example from here and made some modifications to it. I gave it a namespace, and I used the same one they did, which was globals. Then they said, come in here and add a new class. So I typed in public static class global, and it gave me the curly braces. Then I added my method. All right? And then when I did that, guess what I got? The answer is an error, because I had to put this using statement in there because it didn't know about Dialog. So I had to add that. I didn't even need the using system. It's gray. I could have left that out. But then when I went back to my other forms, so I'm going to go back to my form main here. Notice what I did at the top of the program. I put in using globals. That allowed me to access my other file. So now that file it held a method called exit application. Now notice what I'm doing inside of my exit routine. I'm calling global.exit application. It knew it was there. So now I can undo this. I can remove this from all 4 of these. So instead of writing, and it's not big, it's what, 43? It's about 10 lines of code, 12 lines. But I wrote it 4 times. That's 50 lines of code that I've replaced with 12. That's a good savings. Plus, if I have to change it, I only change it in one spot, correct? Or if I have to add something to it, I only add something to it in one spot. And that's just called doing things the right way, period. All right? So this is the stuff that we'll be starting to work on next week, is what I'm telling you. All right. So let's look at the rest of the stuff that we're going to be doing next week. All right. So 5 more types of controls. These are radio buttons. Radio buttons are used for what are referred to as mutually exclusive choices. Looking around in here, I don't know who the oldest person in this room here, other than me, is, and I don't care. But if you've ever seen an older car back in the day, and this was even before my time, believe it or not, but typically, you know, in the older cars, they had the old push button radio. You know, you could hit a button and you could, you know, have like 5 of them in there, etc. All right. That's what these names come from. They're for what are referred to as mutually exclusive choices. So when you create a radio button, you typically put them in a grouping like this. So you can either credit card or you can bill customer. You can't do both. You can also set it up so that by default, one of them is chosen if you want to do that. They have a property that's called checked. Just like checkboxes have a property that's called checked. But the takeaway is radio buttons are for mutually exclusive choices. So I could have as many of these as I wanted. So I could say, for example, what shift do you work? And I'm going to assume you can only work first shift, second shift, or third shift. And you would pick one of them, but that would be the one you would pick. If you picked a different one, the one you originally picked, it would be replaced with the one you went and picked again. All that makes sense? Then there are checkboxes. You can have as many or as few of them as you want to or need to have. A real popular one today is if you've got an internet form, how would you like us to contact you? And it might say phone, text, email, or something else. You might have 4 checkboxes. You could check none, 1, 2, 3, or all 4. So they're for non-mutually exclusive choices. You can put them in a group box like this if you want to, but typically you don't see it that way. So the group box, again, typically groups things together that belong together. Then there's a list box. Guess what? You know what those are because we used one of those in that array program that we did, that GUI array program. You add items. Everything that's in a list box is referred to as a list box item. You can add them when you create the list box. You can add them later. One kind of cool thing about a list box, all right, I'll put one in here and then I'll remove it right away. But in fact, let me just throw in another new form. So again, this is just a junk form I'm going to get rid of in a minute. But if I come over here to list box, there it is. So if I wanted to put the members of my family in there, I could do it in code. I could say listbox1.items.add, and I could put my name, and I could do that 6 times. Or 5 times. I'm not going to include our dog. But you get the idea? I could do that. Or I can click in here. I can come over, and it's in here someplace, where it says items and it says collection. Hopefully you can see that. And I can click on there, click the ellipsis, God bless you, and I can type in here, Jeff, Sandy, Taylor, Mackenzie, and Chloe, and click OK. Now they're in there already. So you can pre-populate a list box, or you can populate it in code. You can also change it after it's been created in code. But if I take this now, and I were to run that, that's what you'd see. All right, I don't want to take the time to go back over and play with this. So again, if you are creating radio buttons, you typically create a group box first. All right, and then you put your radio buttons inside of there. So if I had these radio buttons, if I wanted 3 of them, and each one was going to represent, I don't know, what shift you worked or whatever, I would do it like this. All right. And you'll notice if I click on any one of these, there is a property down here that's called checked. And if I double click on it to make it true, can you see how it's blackened in now? So that's one way you can preset things. Check boxes, on the other hand, I can just go in and drag them in, put them wherever I want to put them. Okay? So that's 1, 2. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to get rid of this. So there's group box, there's radio button, there's checkbox, there's list box, and what's the other one that they mentioned in here? Combo box. That's also referred to as a drop down. So if you look in here, select a month and select a year. Would that make sense to everybody? You see that a lot on credit cards. You know, when does your credit card expire? Or when is your birthday? Or whenever. All right. So they explain each one here, but I just showed them to you. I'm not going to sit and read to you. All right. How do you work with combo boxes and list boxes? They're very similar. Now look at this, because this is important, all right? Notice there's selected index and selected item. The first item that you put into a box, so in the example that I showed you, this one, Jeff would be index 0. Selected item would be Jeff. Selected index would be 0. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So that's how that works. So you can either grab the index or the item. If there's nothing in there yet, then the index will return a value, or if you didn't select anything, of -1. So if I went through there and I asked for Bob, there's no Bob in my family, so it would return -1, meaning that an absence of that value. All right. So selected item, as it says, the object, the text for the value, you can automatically sort them. I didn't show you that. So if I come back here, these are not in any kind of alphabetic order. But if I click on this and I go down to where it says sorted and I double click on it, they're now sorted in alphabetic order. Not only that, if I add a new one, so let's add in here, they're not members of my family, but just so you see this. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in Amanda, and in fact, let's put it in this order. So we'll put in Ziggy, Yolanda, and Amanda. All right. And as soon as I click OK, Amanda is now at the beginning. Yolanda and Ziggy are at the bottom because I set the sorted property. All right. Sometimes that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. For instance, if I was doing years, it would make sense to put them in sorted order, wouldn't it? But if I was doing months, I don't think so. All right. All right. There's different drop-down styles that you can use. Items is basically the collection itself. Selection mode, you can set it up so you can select only one, and I think that's the default. All right. And you can set it up to multiple simple or multiple extended. The difference between multiple simple and multiple extended is multiple simple, if I want to be able to select 3 of them, they have to be connected physically to one another. Extended means I can hold down on the control key and click all over the place in the list. All right, common things that you do: add to a list, insert. So add will add the item. Insert, as it says, you can tell it where you want it to add it. Remove it, to remove a specified item, or there's different ways to remove, but this is the one we actually use this. We use that clear because we wanted to make sure in our list box we always started out with an empty list. And notice it says to work with the items in a list box or combo box. So basically they share the way things are done. I'm not going to go through this, but if you look on the example here, they give you plenty of examples. Here's one that loads it in. for months. Here's the years. All right. And it shows you how you can put it in this way to clear and add things manually like that. Okay. It says you can also use the string collection editor to load items in. To display this editor, select the control, select the edit items tag from the smart menu. What the heck does that mean? Well, let's go in just so you see this. I'm going to add another one of these right here. In fact, let's use the drop down. That's called a combo box. Okay. Everybody see this? What you may or may not be able to see, you're going to have to look closely. Way up here, there's a little arrow. Some of these controls have arrows. Usually you use those controls in accordance with a database, but there's other ways you can use them as well. So if I click on that arrow, it gives me, and it says, oh, combo box tasks. Do you want to use data-bound items? That's for a database. Or do you want to edit the items? So if I click edit items, that brings up the same thing that we saw, the same window that we saw before for the list box. So if I put in here 1955, 1956, 1957, etc., and I click OK, all right, you might use say, well, they're not there. They will be there when you run the program. All right. Okay. It says later in chapter 19, you'll learn techniques that can be used to load combo boxes and list boxes with data that's stored in the database. That's typically what you'll want to do. All right. Check boxes then and radio buttons. Notice checked means literally that. If you've either checked inside of a list box or you've checked the radio button, the checked property will be true. If you have not, the checked property will be false. So it's a Boolean. All right. And the checked changed, when this is especially important for radio buttons. When I go from credit card to bill customer, a check changed event has taken place. All right. So as it says, to determine whether a radio button or checkbox is checked, check the checked property. When I say check it, I mean that's what you test. Group boxes are typically used to group radio buttons that function as a group, but you don't have to do that. Most of the time people do it because it really makes it apparent to whomever is running the program exactly what you're doing or trying to do. All right. Tab order, I'm going to totally skip because you all know this. The only thing that you might have found a little hinky about tab order is when you've got a group box like this. So this is 7. And then you click the first thing, it becomes 7.0 and 7.1 because they're all part of the group box. And that's why it does it like that. All right, I don't think there's anything in here that we haven't already talked about, to be honest with you. Again, labels can't receive the focus, etc. All right, how to get all the information you need. Again, that's hitting that F1 key, so I'm not going to go through that. The multi-form projects, this is why I started the lecture the way that I did, was to show you that. I figured it would make more sense to show you an actual running version of this than to go through it like this. So again, what have they done there? They have right mouse clicked and shows add new item, and they go to Windows Form and they give it a name. When you do this, it's up to you. It's automatically going to say the word form in there, and then whatever you want to call it. All right, I'm still using form, like I have form white, form red, form blue, etc. Some people use the prefix FRM. Again, I don't care if you want to use those prefixes. Some of you are doing that. For labels, you use LBM. For text boxes, TXT, etc. That's okay. Just be consistent. Always do it or never do it. All right. But when you do this, notice they said for payment.cs. It automatically creates it as a C# file. So even if you left off the .cs there, it would be put in here once it gets created, just so you know that. All right. So how to add a new form. You can also add existing forms. So if I could grab a form that I did in another project and bring it in. Now, sometimes when you do that, as it says, you're going to have to go in and change the namespace. I already showed you those namespaces on how all of them, except the new one I created, they all said namespace main form, or a multiple form it was. All right, code that's generated for a new form, usually not too much. All right, it's a new form. It's usually empty, just about empty. So it says initialize component. This is basically something that all of these happen. This routine in here is literally what's called a constructor, and it means that this is what runs when you create a new instance of this form called form payment. That's all you really need to know about that for now. How to rename a form, I've shown you that already. The easiest way is to right mouse click on it in the Solution Explorer and choose rename. One thing, or two things. First of all, don't rename a form and make it the same name as another form you already have. Won't let you do that. Second, when you rename a form like this, do not remove the .cs part. Don't even monkey with that. Because again, there are a lot of internal files that depend on this stuff. And that's a good way to screw up your project. Also, when you're naming a form, don't put blank spaces in there. Don't put special characters in there. Don't even put hyphens or underscores in there. You're best off just using letters. Occasionally you might use a number, order form 1, order form 2, or something like that. All right. How to display the first form of an application? Guess what? You know how to do that. Now, typically the first form of the application is the first one you create. Everybody hear that? It's the first one that you create. So what does that mean? Well, look on the screen here. And the form main that we have right here, that's the first one I created. All right. If I go down in here to my program.cs file, my form main, I renamed it form red, white, blue v1. All right. This is for the, I think this is for the old one. But the point is this line of code in here that says application run, that's telling it what to do when the project begins. It's telling it what is our startup form. Okay? And what if I don't like that? What if I wanted it to be something else? Well, I think I'm in this one form, so I'm going to remove this. All right? And I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to bring up this one. I think this is the one here. Let's look. All right, form main. So that is the one. What if instead of form main, what if I wanted the first form to come up to be form red? Are you with me? I wanted it to change. Well, I'll just come in here and type in red. It's not recommended that you do that. But I can right mouse click on form red, and there should be a thing in there. Thought there was, maybe I'm wrong. Then they've changed it. There used to be one that said set as start form. I don't see it anymore. So maybe you do have to come in there. Let's see if I put in red right here. All right. I'm going to do that. I'm going to save it. Worst thing that happens is I've screwed up my program, but that's fine. So now I want to make sure that that's my startup project. See if it starts with a red form. And it does. So if you've got multiple forms, so, again, you might say, okay, that's all fine, Jeff. Why the hell are you even telling us this? Do we have to build our splash screen first? No. We can build it at any time, and if we want it to come up first, then later we will come into this file, and we're probably going to name ours FRM or form splash screen. All right? I'm going to change that back to main because that's the correct beginning form. All right. All right, how to display a form as a dialog box. If you don't know what that means, if you all look on the screen, please. You ever done this? Just right mouse clicked? That's what they're talking about. So if you want something to show as a dialog box, you can make it appear when something happens. A lot of times you'll do that for like a help screen or whatever. People know that they can right mouse click and maybe get help at any time. All right. So that shows you how to make a form as a dialog box. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. Notice when you do it, There's form border style, so you can set how big it's going to be. There's a control box, and that says, notice if you set it to none, that's our minimize, there's our maximize, and there's our exit. Notice we don't have any of those here. You can do that if you want to. All right, or you can add just or remove any of them that you want to add or remove. All right, this looks very similar to what I showed you though. Create the new instance of the form and do a show dialog on it. All right. How to pass data between a form and a custom dialog box. There is a special property that is in basically virtually every control that you have. Just to show you, I'm going to come here and I'm going to go back to this junk form that I created that's called junk.cs, and I'm going to click on this checkbox. And if you may or may not notice this, there's a special property here that's called tag that all controls have, that you can put in, I'm not going to say secret, but information that the program might need as you're using something. And that's what they mention in there. I'm not going to use that, but I don't mean to downplay its importance at all, because in the right situation, it would make a lot of sense. All right. So it says there, the tag property provides a convenient way for you to be able to pass data between forms in a multiple form application. A dialog box can set its tag property before it returns. Probably I could have rewritten that program that I showed you with the multiple forms, use the tag property and cut it down to even less than it was. All right. Message box, I don't think there's anything in here we haven't already talked about. You know what the buttons are, you know what the icon is. There is a default button that you can put in, and here's the different dialog results you can check for, but this should look pretty doggone familiar to you because it's the one, almost the one we've been using. The form closing event they mention here, you literally can come in and just, when you want to close it, let's look at the example that's back here. So they say, where is it? Oh, they didn't, I thought they used one in here. What we've been doing is we've always been bringing up a message box, but here they're using it. Notice what they have here. They're saying, okay, you've got unsaved data. Do you want to save it? And you ask them yes or no. And if they chose yes, you'll call a routine called save data, and you'll set the cancel default to true. Otherwise, you'll set the cancel to true. If they press cancel, you'll set the cancel to true. What does that mean? That means that if right here, if you press yes, it's going to call a routine that's going to let you save your data. If you press no or cancel, it's going to cancel out of there. Okay? So you can use form closing. I don't like that. I like application.exit. That's the one that I showed you. All right, that's considered the more traditional way of closing a form. And the program ends. They've got their own payment application here. It's a fine application. All right. And then they give you the code for that. And that's it. So again, what I plan on doing next week, and we'll start on Monday. I don't know how long this will take. I don't know what this will look like. I've done absolutely nothing for this, except in my mind, I've kind of scoped out what I want it to look like. It's going to have a minimum of 6 forms on it. A splash screen, a main form, a form for hourly, a form for commission, a form for salary, and a form for piece workers. We might have a grand total form for everybody. I don't know. We might have total form for each one and a grand total form. I don't know. But we'll do this together. All right? And we will work on that. Now, if you are behind, you know who you are. What you should have in by today is all the work through Chapter 8. Some of you are far from that. Some of you are very close to that. Some of you may be there. All right? But what I want is any late work that people are turning in, you're going to have lab time next week. You probably have 2 hours per day. That's 10 hours. You should, even if you're behind, be able to catch up on the majority of whatever it is you're behind on. So I'm going to expect that anybody who's turning in late work is going to turn it in by a week from today. All that makes sense? And then a week from today, all we're going to do is go over the written test for 8, 9, and 10, and the rest of the period will be lab. So whatever we do on this project, we'll do for 2 hours Monday, 2 hours Tuesday, 2 hours Wednesday, and 2 hours Thursday. All right. In addition, what I'm going to quickly do right now, not in front of you, but I'm going to go and make sure that I can access for each one of you in here, the tests you took yesterday. All right, just to make sure I can, and if I cannot, I will let you know. I want to do that before you leave today. Any questions on any of the material or what we're going through next week? All right, then the rest of the period is lab.